Now you were 4-1 coming into this, locked for top 8. You had a good run today.
Yeah, I had a really sweet run. I like only lost to show and tell. It was 4-0 at one point, and then I got against the show and tell
Mm.
guy with the commandeer, which is unlucky.
Oof.
Yeah, like
I
I picked
love
Belcher, yeah, like, because like
I
no one's playing
love Dredgelord's
commandeer.
this.
Yeah.
Commandeer is the funniest. Like just wildly disadvantageous until it's not. But these Rakshas's bargains have been overperformers.
Yeah, it's really cool to see like the list with the new tech because it's not a list you see on ladder ever. Like I jammed a bunch of Belcher on ladder to practice and I saw like
Mm,
no show and tell and I gave it like no sideboard consideration too because I kind of thought the archetype's like dead. But people move past it.
yeah. Like I feel I mean it's the class I always call it the affinity cycle. It's just because affinity is the most extreme example. Wait, can they hear us,
Yeah.
Tyrant? Okay, great.
Oh, sweet.
So sorry, everybody. All right. You absolutely did. I'm just a little sleepy. All right, so we're back with Karai. You want to introduce yourself really quick, Karai?
Yeah, I'm Corey. I was playing in the tournament. I just got top 8 and lost on stream. I ended up bringing Green Black Belcher to the tournament just to give a little background as to why I made that choice. Timeless meta is really cool, really interesting, and it's always shifting. So after last tournament, we had like a really good showing by like Shift and Tell, Blue Psychic Frog decks, and Energy. And the meta started to shift where those Psychic Frog decks got really good. So people started like teching against it. They started playing slow combo, like Shifting Woodlands combo, fast combo, like the Belcher deck I was playing today, and traditional show and tell kind of like fell out of the meta completely. And what I feel like
Mm,
happened over the last month is that the meta is now reversing, where there were so few people playing those decks that people stopped playing the frog decks to prey on them. People stopped playing Commandeer. People stopped playing their free counter spells, right? So now it's really free to register a Dark Ritual pile or a show and tell deck because there's no like
mm,
proper deck to police you in this tournament. And as we see by the top 8, because traditional show and tell, the version not built around Shifting Woodlands and Eldrazi is like kind of dead on ladder. I wasn't expecting to see it all in the tournament, and it's
mm.
3 out of the top 8. Then there's 3 Dark Rituals piles in the top 8, and I wouldn't like not have predicted that
Yeah.
if you asked me a month ago.
Uh, yeah. Oh wow. All right. So what just happened here? Sorry, I do want to come back around because I find that really interesting. But the Resiru kept a 1 land hand. Well, 0 land hands. There's no lands in the deck. Because they're running a Belcher pile and they're running one of the more traditional Belcher piles, unlike Karay's very interesting Karn pile. But we have a turn 1 nothing, turn 2 nothing, turn 3 Dark Ritual put in Saurian Imperious Bloodlord, minus Sorin to put in Saint Elenda. Saint Elenda grabs Inspiring Cleric, and then Inspiring Cleric gains for life, which makes a 4/4 lifelinker. One of the most powerful turn 1 players, still pretty good on turn 3. Oh, yes. So they're playing Oops All Spells. It's more of the Dredge version. But the point, they're running a landless deck. And instead of playing Belcher, which is powerful but easy to interact with, they're running Sorin to jump some threats into play. And I really thought that Dredgelord had it when they show and telled, but their opponent used the show and tell to grab Invoke the Divine. They put a Saint Elender into play, which drafted an Invoke the Divine to target the Omniscience, but Dredgelord had the Mana Drain, and that was it. What would you bring in here, Corey?
Yeah, I also got totally distracted by our conversation. Forgot that we started the game. But the spell pierces, yeah. So against this matchup, you want your anti-combo cards. So spell pierces, permission, like counter spells, are really good.
Mhm.
Cards like Crossing Grip and Force of Vigor often come into like well, they're not playing a Belcher variant like I am, but even against
No,
Belcher
but they
variants,
do have
Force
the
of Vigor
Belchers in
doesn't
the
cut it.
board.
Yeah, but what's really killer against a deck like this is actually, again, they're not Belcher. I was about to say Leyline would be killer against my deck, but theirs is a little bit different. I'd have to look at the deck list and see what like their alt win cons are
Yeah.
beyond just the Balustrade Spy thing.
Yeah. Well, so this is so Dredgelord is an excellent player. They don't play a ton of timeless, but they did a lot of prep for this event.
Mhm.
And this is open deck list. So they get to know that the question here is, are the Belchers coming in out of the board? Like, is it worth becoming a Belcher deck? Because we saw that a 8 or 11 power on turn 1 just isn't good enough against Omniscience most of the time. Like this is a sideboard prediction battle right now.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I was pulling up the deck list while ago. So yeah, they do have all four Belchers in the sideboard, and
Mhm.
late line is tough to deal with. The Belcher decks can find ways to deal with it, but they are on a non-green version of Belcher. So it's a lot harder to clear. They pretty much have to do the Sorin Alinda thing in order to clear the ley line
Mhm.
in this matchup. So it becomes a lot more about trying to resolve that half of your deck.
Yeah. Like Veil of Summer, I like going down to one Veil of Summer here because it's still nice to be able to grab it with the waterlog teachings, but it's not as strong in general. Um,
Yeah, I agree. Veil isn't necessarily a card that's going to help you. Its use cases are pretty like marginal compared to some of the other cards in your sideboard that are going to be straight up backbreaking to your opponent, stuff like you
mhm.
have to play around. Whereas Veil Summer is just a bit of an inconvenience for them.
Right. And compared to a lot of the landless lists, Oops All Spells has more ability to just like we have seen so many combo v combo matchups just devolve into a slugfest with whatever they have available, whether that's their lands that turn into the Phyrexians that make things indestructible, or just a few Orcish Bowmasters on either side. But Oops All Spells often goes off in an incomplete way that just floods the board with prize amalgams or puts 11 power into play very fast. Um, so they might
Yeah,
need to speed. They might feel the need to speed up the combo with the dark rituals or with the belchers, or they might change things up for the sake of change.
yeah. A lot of these combo versus combo matches are really weird, and it's something I wish I got more chance to practice going into this because I didn't anticipate this much show and tell. Here's a turn one Sorin, and sometimes there's just nothing you can do when you're on the draw.
This deck is
Good
so
old
good at
timeless.
mulliganing. Compared to other combo
Yeah,
decks, this deck is amazing at mulligans.
yeah, that's like the most skill expressive part of the deck. Like there's two really skill expressive parts of the deck. One is mulliganing and the other is like making good necro piles if they're on a necro
Mm-hmm.
version. Their
It's
version is
like,
non-necro, so you're just mulliganing to something that can win through as many pieces of interaction as possible. Obviously, at
yeah.
turn one, when you're against your opponent who is not playing Commandeer, I believe, is something that's going to win every time. So you
Mm-hmm.
can mulligan like really aggressively to try to find that.
Yeah, and Dredgelord is not running Chrome Moxes. They're not running Chrome Moxes or Dark Rituals. There's no fast mana. Like Dredgelord is a quote very fair version of the Sultai Show and
Yeah.
Tell deck.
hmm Yeah,
So
it's
it's
the classic version of it.
yeah, like they can even on turn, even as soon as turn two, like if Dredgelord gets a turn, they can stop the Sorin. But not if
Yeah,
they
but
don't.
show and tell can win out of nowhere, but unfortunately, it's just too slow. There's nothing you could do on turn two with this build of the show and tell that actually pulls it back.
The Bowmasters blocks two creatures.
Yeah, but they have to pay life art for a land in this spot, so it's just barely
Oof,
not enough.
so close. If they had
Yeah,
let on the breeding
theoretically,
pool, they
mm,
could have shifting woodland this turn.
they could have, but then
But then
Soren has the plus for three
they
points
wouldn't
of
have
heat,
black
right?
mana. Wow, turn one Sorin. Saint Aledra is just there is no vampire as good as Saint Aledra in real magic.
Yeah, it's an alchemy special. Otherwise, this thing would be banned in a couple of formats, definitely. It's
Yeah.
just a very strong thing that you could do for 3 mana. You have to view Saint Alenda as a mana card in these pair decks. And the fact that Saint
It's
Alenda
true.
is a Swiss Army knife, like in this
Hmm.
game, it just put a shit ton of power into play. It just put
Yeah.
11 power into play, but there's some times where you can get pretty much a sideboard card out of it. You
Yeah.
can get Face
Face
Fetters, you can
Feathers,
get an
Invoke the
Evoke the
Divine.
Divine.
We saw
Very
Invoke the Divine happen last game. If Dredgeloid didn't have the mana drain, that would have been it.
bad. He's spinning his wheels trying to find an answer.
Yeah.
There's just
Like
no answer in the deck.
so compared to the other Sultai show and tell decks, I think Dredgelord is running the most consistent one, but it's a consistent turn three. that's
Yes,
that's not good enough.
exactly. You're always trading the ability to answer other decks, the ability to be consistent, the ability to react for the ability to just go fast.
Hmm.
Like what I was on today is just going fast. And if I
Hmm.
don't win under the opponent's permission on turn two, it's going to be really tough. And
It's
it's the
true.
same thing like Reg deck that we're against. It's Show and Tell really wants this game to go long, so they need their critical pieces of interaction to be sideboarded in. They need their spell pierces, they need their mana drains, they need those cards to be in the opening hand, and they need to hope their opponent doesn't high roll with like a crazy hand that could like breeze through interaction.
Yeah, I love that you can high roll a crazy hand down at like 3 cards, 2 or 3, like 3 or 4 cards can be your high roll hand.
Oh yeah, you can mulligan all the way to 3 and find it. It's
Oh,
crazy. And what's cool about Timeless is that like there are ways to beat it. I know it might seem
that
unbeatable to someone who doesn't play the format that much, but like before last tournament, we tested like a bunch of
mhm.
these high roll decks against Energy, and Energy does beat the high roll because Energy just needs one piece of interaction, like one Swords to
Yeah,
Plowshares to answer Elenda.
and
Same
they're
with the
so good
Psychic
at
Frog
having
deck.
those on turn 1 consistently.
Yeah, exactly. The Psychic Frog decks and Energy decks are just piles of interaction with some busted Modern Horizons creatures in them, right?
If you get the chance, take a look at the person who wasn't unable to make it today. They're on Jeskai. I want to call it Delver. I want to call it Jeskai Delver for Timeless.
Oh, is it the one with the stifles in it?
They were running Dragon's Rage Channelers, Ragavans, and Counterspell.
That's cool.
It was I was so excited to see that list, but they were unable to make it today. But I'm going to be giving that list a try. There were a lot of creative lists today here. People came up with so many interesting ways to deal with this style of combo, whether it's speed or very specific forms of interaction.
Yeah. And we see the keep by the show and tell player, and it's like an odd keep, and they're doing odd things like end step
Mm,
brainstorming, but it's the kind of concession you have to make when you're up against
yeah.
the Belcher deck. You have to keep that turn one spell pierce, and you have to have the mana up to spell pierce. So you're gonna end up doing
Yeah.
some weird things that are anti patterns you're not supposed to do, like brainstorming on your end step, just to make sure you always have your interaction up.
Yeah. And if your opponent keeps 7 with this deck, you should be scared. Like that deck mulligans a lot. You spell
Yeah,
pierce
and
here?
mhm.
No.
Yeah, you wouldn't spell pierce that one. You got to hit the
Yeah.
payoff here, but the problem is they're going to have multiple payoffs. A Sorin here is
Mhm.
going to eat the spell pierce, but next turn they're probably going to have a balustrade spy, and at minimum they're just going to cast like the silly silver smoke ghoul and just like start turning them sideways. I know we
Right.
have a bowmasters here, but
Oh,
like those
so
threats eventually up.
if you haven't seen the Oops All Spells decks play yet, there is a Balustrade Spy says target player mills cards until they hit a land card, and then all those cards go into the graveyard. The Balustrade Spy mills the whole library except the Progenitus and or World Spine Worm, which gets shuffled back in the library so they don't deck. And among those cards milled, there will be 4 Creeping Chills, which deals 3 damage to each opponent. You gain 3 life. 4 Silver Smoke Schools, which at the beginning of your end step, if you've gained 3 more life, return it to play. And 4 Prize Amalgams, which at the beginning of each, like when a creature is put into play, you return it to play at the beginning of the next end step. So on average, it's going to deal 12 damage and it's going to deal 9 damage or 10 damage on average and put 9-ish creatures into play.
Yeah, there's an interesting decision point here. The show and tell player, I think, did differently than me. You could have abrupticate the Mox there. And it's
Mm-hmm.
a cool decision because it takes your opponent off of being able to just play a land to get 4 mana, because 4 mana
Mm-hmm.
is your Balustrade Spy and your Belcher mana. So I would have really considered abrupt decaying that Chrome Mox at sorcery speed and keep my opponent off of me.
So I agree with you. But watching Dredgelord play all day, he has been consistent about not attacking mana sources, and that seems to be part of his broader just strategy or play style. He always
Yeah.
attacks the cards that he views as threats, and like we even saw that against you. He was unwilling to risk you having the Belcher in hand or you having the Ritual in hand for many turns until he was sure he could stop it. I would have
Yeah.
fired it multiple turns before him, but we've seen it pay off too. We've seen it hurt him as well, but
I mean, it's good principled magic right there. Generally, like with other cards like Thoughtseize, the old adage is you don't use Thoughtseize to just up your opponent's mana. They can always top deck out of
Mhm.
it. It's just that some of these games are really
Right.
fast and they operate on super thin margins, where
Well, here's
delaying
the
your
show and
Belcher
tell.
opponent is good. Yeah, the show and tell might win the game. You just have to consider what goes into play off of it. If a Balustrade Spy hits play, he takes 12 damage off of Creeping Chills, but there's no instant speed win there. Belcher gets put into play, it is an instant speed
I
win when you look at that.
I was just going to say, if it's a Belcher, that's going to end it. So I might consider abrupt decaying the Chrome Mox first.
Well, he had a tap land in hand, so you can't do Volt.
Right. But
5
I
mana
would
wasn't
have
available.
waited a turn. Like
Yeah.
because the downside to the Balustrade Spy build of this deck that it takes an extra turn to win afterward.
Yeah.
You might be able to bluff it here.
Just bluff a good old stifle. No, not this game.
Yeah,
Well played by the spy player.
yeah. Doing nothing is one of the hardest things for a Magic player to do. But when you know what your opponent's on, it can help.